let's talk about Mission Impossible 8, The Final Reckoning. What could be the final Mission Impossible movie from the duo of Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise, both producers. Tom Cruise, of course, stars in the movie, reprising his role as Ethan Hunt, the greatest spy secret agent in history, clearly after this movie. And of course, McQuarrie writes and directs the film once again. This was originally called Dead Reckoning Part 2, but the name was changed, and it's probably because the plot is certainly a lot bigger than just what we saw in not only the seventh movie, but all previous Mission Impossible films. Now, before I go any further, this review will not contain any big spoilers. The premise of the film, however, does follow up with the previous one, which is about this AI hive mind known as the Entity. Now, the Entity's goal is to take over all of the nuclear weapons from all of the major nuclear powers in the world, including, of course, the United States, which puts the United States in a very awkward position because should every other power get taken over, the U.S. may have no choice but to voluntarily launch the missiles. So Ethan and his team have to come in and solve the riddle to literally save mankind. This plot, as I'm watching the movie, all I kept thinking about was Terminator. That's all that kept crossing my mind. The Entity is pretty much, in my opinion, the best on-screen portrayal of Skynet we've ever seen. We've seen versions of Skynet in Terminator 4 and 5. Obviously, we saw some of it in the first two, but not quite like the mainframe and the hive mind that we saw in the fourth, and actually fifth Terminator films. This right here, I think, is very, very timely, because this is, we live in a world where AI is growing. And there are people who are very concerned about what happens if AI gets too much power. What happens when AI goes into cyberspace? Will it be able to access weapons? Will it be able to, at some point, deem the human race as being unnecessary? This is playing with all of those tropes that we've seen in the Terminator films, except it hasn't happened yet, and it's up to Ethan and his team to do it. Tom Cruise is joined by Haley Atwell, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, all of them reprising their roles from previous movies, as well as the return of Esai Morales as Gabriel, the ever so dangerous rival of Ethan Hunt. So did this movie stick the landing? If this is the final film, was it a good finale? Like, are you going to leave the theater satisfied? I think the answer is yes. I'm going to tell you this right now. This is a very long film. This movie's almost 3 hours, and for a popcorn action film, 3 hours is a long time. In fact, I do think that there are some parts that could have been shaven off to lower the runtime. There's a sequence in the film that is like an underwater sequence, which, by the way, if you are queasy about underwater stuff, like, or if you have a fear of heights, you may want to know going into this film that they're going to play with that quite a bit. The underwater sequence in this film was about 30 minutes, maybe even longer than that. I'm only ballparking that. I'm not exactly sure how long it was, but it was definitely something that was meant to be nail-biting. Same thing with the final sequence and all the ones earlier in the film. And the thing about the nail-biting aspect when it comes to this movie is that they really sort of came close to becoming a Saturday morning cartoon or a Saturday evening film. This is a popcorn film. What I mean by that is there are things that happen in this film that are very, a little unrealistic. Sometimes in order to accomplish a certain feat, the characters have to do something within seconds. And if they don't, everything is ruined, everything flushes. And this happens multiple times. Now, of course, you want to do this when you build drama. It's a secret agent movie, so you want to have it go all the way down to the final second, but it certainly is a nail biter, which I think is kind of what Tom Cruise wants. Like, I think that's the purpose of these movies, is that when you go into them, you want to believe, okay, can they do it? And you want to have it go all the way to the edge. And they certainly did that here. But like I said, it's a long movie. Now, one of the things that is interesting is that with this film, if it is the last one, it ties in storylines and characters from previous Mission Impossible movies, not just Dead Reckoning. They go all the way back to the first Mission Impossible, directed by Brian De Palma. I did do a review on that film here on the channel. And other adventures that Ethan's been on that sort of were the building blocks to this big grand finale, if that's what it is. Now, one of the things that I kind of wish they would have done a bit more is maybe tried to figure out how to tie it into more adventures. There's about 3 or 4, but they could have done it with a bit more of a, sort of a bookend to everything. But that's kind of an unfair comparison, because then you are sort of running into a situation where it might be too unrealistic. You understand what I'm saying? And this movie's certainly on the edge of that. It is a spectacle, without question. I don't know how much of this film is Tom Cruise doing his own stunts, because there were some stunts in this movie that were just absolutely insane. Like I said, fear of drowning, fear of heights, all of that is going to be, something that's going to be exploited in this film. I do like how Ethan brings the team together. I like Ethan's sort of role and relationship to the U.S. government. And I sort of it's one of those movies that's kind of freaky, because the whole AI thing, you might be walking out of that movie theater scratching your chin saying, what if this really happens? But if this were to really happen, it wouldn't be all down to just one man. This is, of course, a movie. But I had fun with this one, okay? It's a fun film. I'm not sure if I would put it, like, where I would rank it right now. I liked it more than Dead Reckoning, and Dead Reckoning was very good. But man, this one was a spectacle for certain. Again, you have to remember this is a popcorn film, and thus we have to look at it as a popcorn film. But it's not a popcorn film that I feel is dumbed down. I think it's a smart movie. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as smart as some of its predecessors, because there were some other plots in some of the middle films like Fallout and Rogue Nation that may have been a bit more, well thought out, well structured. But this one goes from set piece to set piece. And, again, characters cooperate when you don't know if they really should. Things seem to work out a certain way, but then there's a subversion, and then that sort of course corrects itself. It's a roller coaster. I mean, that's the intention. And if that's the intention, then they accomplished it. And if that's what you're looking for, the 8th Mission Impossible movie is probably one that's worth going out to see. This is a big movie. Like I mentioned, the runtime is long. They packed a lot of stuff in here. It feels almost like 3 movies put together into one, in the sense of like the big set pieces. And of course, the scope is big, and the stakes are about as big as it gets, because although the threat of a nuclear attack has been the centerpiece of previous Mission Impossible films, this is more so a complete destruction of the world by this AI, the entity. And Ethan and his crew have to constantly try to outsmart a machine that thinks faster than humans do, and that is constantly learning at an accelerated rate, and one that is able to map out various conclusions before they come to pass. So if this is the last Mission Impossible film, I don't know how they're going to be able to raise the stakes any higher than this without it becoming a clown show. Like, I don't want to see the next Mission Impossible have Ethan Hunt in space or anything goofy like that. I don't know how they're going to really be able to top this one as far as stakes and scope and just overall size. So maybe it is time to retire the franchise, at least for a little bit. Maybe do some spin-off movies if they want. I wouldn't mind if they did like a prequel with younger actors, telling the story of like Ethan before he joined IMF, and maybe his rivalry with Gabriel. There's a lot of things they could do, but this basically is as good of a send-off as you're going to get, at least in my opinion. Definitely not a perfect movie, but if you like the other 7, you're gonna like this one. I would assume the likelihood of you liking this one is very high. So those are my thoughts. I may do like a discussion video and go into more of the spoilery stuff sometime soon and kind of go deeper into the plot. But again, if you like the other ones, it'll be a thumbs up for you. If you're not really into this type of action, suspense, spy stuff, which I assume most of you are because these movies are popular, but Dead Reckoning didn't do so well. Hopefully this one will do better. At least I'm sure the studio's hoping for that, because this is a very expensive movie. I read somewhere it was like 400 million or something like that. So to break even, and they're going up against Lilo and Stitch. So anyways, that's it for my review of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and bye.